Hey everyone, welcome to my new tutorial. Today we are going to make this battery charging animation and I really hope you will enjoy this one, and if you do, please don't forget to leave the like, and if you're new to the world of 3D and Blender and you want to learn in the most effective way, be sure to check out my courses. I carefully designed them to take you from beginner skills through low poly illustration all the way to full character illustration and textured environment, so if you're interested, please check out the link in the description. Now let's jump right into empty Blender file, and first of all let's select the light and the cube, press X and delete, and now we'll need a shape for the battery, so let's press Shift A and we'll add a circle, and we can leave it at 32 verts. So let's just tap in and press S to make it a little bit smaller, something like this, and now press F to fill and E to extrude like this. Now let's zoom in a little bit and I'll press Ctrl R to create a loop cut here in the middle and increase the number of cuts with the mouse wheel. Let's confirm with the left click and the right click to release, and now we can press S then Z to scale this on the Z axis like that. And now let's just press P to separate and separate the selection. That will separate this middle part into a new object right here. So now we can just alt click the bottom loop and you can enable X-ray view if you want to see what's going on there, and press F to fill. That will create a face on top of this, and now alt click this top loop and press F to fill as well. And just to make sure normals are correct, let's press A and Shift N to recalculate them. Now we can tab out and let's select the new object that we separated. Let's tab into the edit mode, press A to select all, and we'll scale it down a little bit. So let's press S, and to make sure we're scaling only on X and Y, let's press Shift Z and scale it like this. And now we can tab out and let's press slash on a numpad. That will isolate our object into the local view. You can see it right here. And we can now disable the X-ray view, and let's go to the modifiers panel and let's add the first modifier, which will be the solidify, and we'll increase the thickness to something like this. You can hold Shift if you want to go in smaller increments. So this will be the thickness of the glass on the battery. And now let's collapse this and let's add the bevel modifier. Let's increase the segments to 2 and let's reduce the amount so we have some supporting edges there. And just to make sure that the shading is looking good, we can tab in and let's press Ctrl R and create few loop cuts. Let's increase with the mouse wheel and let's create few loop cuts like this. Left click and right click to release, and now we can go ahead and add subdivision surface modifier with 2 levels, right click and shade smooth. So we'll have now this nice solid block of glass for the battery. And now we can press Shift D to duplicate this, right click to release in place. Let's look from the top by pressing 7 on a numpad. Let's tab into the edit mode, press A to select all, and let's press S and then Shift Z again to lock it on X and Y, and let's make it smaller like this so it fits inside like this. And now we can press slash on a numpad and slash again, so we isolate only the new object. And let's remove the solidify modifier, we don't need it anymore, and let's just fill this. So alt click the bottom loop, press F and enable X-ray view, and we'll press I to inset to create the supporting loop, and now press Ctrl R and create one down here. So when we apply subdivision surface modifier, we'll get smaller rounded edge. And now on top, let's alt click the top loop, and instead of filling it with one face, we can press Ctrl F for face menu, and we can choose grid fill. That will create a fill like this with some structure in there. And now we can press Ctrl R and create one loop cut here on top, just like this. And now let's look from the side by pressing 3 on a numpad, select the top faces, and let's go to object data properties and let's create a new vertex group and hit assign. They will assign this selection to the vertex group, and now we can press slash again. And one more thing I want to do is to create shape keys here. So let's tab out and let's create a new shape key. That will be the basic one, and right away let's create a new one. That will be the key one. Let's tab in. First let's alt click the bottom loop and hold Shift S and snap cursor to select it. That will make sure the cursor is at the bottom of that cylinder. And now let's press A to select all, hold period on the keyboard and switch to 3D cursor, and you can change the setting right here as well. And now press S then Z and scale it down like this. And now if you tab out, you will see the original shape, but you can control this with the shape key right there, which we'll use for the animation. And the last thing we'll need for the battery is the displacement on top. So let's again hit slash on a numpad and let's disable the X-ray view. And in the modifier stack, we should have bevel and subdivision. So let's remove the bevel. We only want the subdivision to be there. And let's add a new modifier, and that'll be the displacement. But let's choose the vertex group we created before, so it only applies to the top verts. And now let's switch the direction to Z and reduce the strength to something like 0.5. And now let's create a new texture here, and let's hit this button right here to go to the texture settings and switch to clouds texture. And we can of course modify the size so we get something like this. And of course we can go back to the modifiers panel and reduce the strength so it's really subtle. And now we basically created like a fluid surface. And I want the animation to be cyclic, and for this we can use object coordinates with a little cyclic movement. So let's press Shift A, let's create a curve, and let's create circle right here, and we can make it smaller. And now we'll need to create an empty, so let's press Shift A, let's create an empty, and this could be anything. I want to choose something subtle, so I will choose single arrow, and let's enable X-ray view so we see it right here. And we'll add a constraint here, so let's go to the constraints and let's add follow path constraint, and we'll choose our circle as a target. So now if you move offset between 1 and 100, it will go a full circle, and that's what we'll use for the cyclic animation in loop. So let's select the end frame to something like 150, and on the frame 1 let's right click and insert keyframe, and let's move this to a frame 151, and let's set the offset to 100, and we can insert keyframe by hovering and pressing I as well. And now let's make sure this movement is linear, because right now it will accelerate. So if you press D in a timeline and choose linear with both keyframes selected, it will go in a nice loop all around. And now we'll use this empty object as a mapping for the displacement. So let's go to the modifier, and for coordinates we'll use object and just pick this empty. So now if you play it, you will have this movement, and it's looking great. But sometimes the cyclic movement is really visible. So what you can do with like a vertical object like this, you can select this circle, press R then X and 90 and rotate it 90 degrees. And now the movement will be a little bit different, and I think it will better serve this kind of vertical shape. So let's leave it like this, and we now have like a nice fluid surface. And of course when you select this and go to the shape keys, you can still modify the height of the surface, which is exactly what we want here. So let's hit slash on a numpad to exit the local view, and let's finish the battery. So let's just select this object right here, tab into the edit mode. I will go for face select by pressing 3, select the top face, and press Shift D to duplicate, right click to release in place. And let's make sure our pivot point is back to median. Let's press S to make this smaller, and just extrude with E, press I to inset and extrude once again. And now we can press Ctrl B to create a bevel and increase number of cuts with the mouse wheel like this. And now we can tab out, and let's just go ahead and add the bevel modifier with 2 segments, and we can press Ctrl 2 to add subdivision surface, and let's disable the X-ray view. And for this on top to work, we can modify the bevel angle to something like 45, and let's reduce the amount, of course, so it's a little bit sharper. And now we can right click and shade smooth. So that's about the battery. We have the glass and we have the fluid, so we can go ahead and animate all of this. We already animated the surface, so now we only need to animate the timing for the charging and discharge of the battery. And of course you might want to have this longer. I want to make this quick and fast, so I choose like 150 frames for the whole animation, so it will be a little bit faster. So you can of course, you know, stretch this however you want, but my plan is show the charging really quickly in the beginning and then like a slower discharge. So let's go to the frame 5, and with the fluid selected, let's go to the object data properties, let's increase it to 1, and I will press I to insert keyframe. And now let's go to like frame 30, and let's reduce to 0 and press I to insert keyframe. And now we can only duplicate this keyframe. So let's press Shift D with this one selected and duplicate it to like frame 65. And now select the first one, press Shift D and move it somewhere here to like frame 130. So now if you enable X-ray view, you will see that the battery charges and then like slowly discharges, and then it repeats. And to make this look a little bit more interesting, I want to add like a little bubbles down there. So let's press Shift A and we'll add another circle. And let's look from the top by pressing 7 on a numpad, tab into the edit mode, and let's scale it down like this. And press Ctrl F and grid fill. Now press 3 on a numpad for side view and press G then Z and move this up a little bit like this, and that'll be our particle emitter. So let's go to the particle settings, let's create a new emitter, and for the source we are looking for faces. Let's just set the frame start and frame end. I want the frame start to be 1 and frame end to be 150, and I'm looking for a lifetime of 10. But now if you play it, they will fall down because there's physics in place, but I want to use physics, the Newtonian type, but I want to disable the field weights and gravity. So now if you play it, they will just raise up and they will be bubbling like this, and with the short lifetime they will just go up here. If you want it to be even shorter, you can like enter 5 and they will be just down there at the bottom. And now we can just reduce the number to something, you know, more acceptable, something like 200 or so, maybe slightly more. And now let's press Shift A and we'll create the UV sphere, and we can make this a little bit less detailed, so something like 16 and 8. And we can right click and shade smooth, tab into the edit mode and make it smaller, tab out, and let's press F2 and call it bubble. And let's make sure it doesn't peaks out of the base of the battery there. And now we can select the particle emitter and just scroll down, and in the render settings switch halo to object and choose the bubble right here. And now we can set the scale right here and scale randomness as well. And let's now play with the number of them. So yeah, I think we can add some more, something like this, and maybe we can make it smaller. So this will be our little bubbling, but to make this loop nicely, we'll need another set of particle, which is totally okay. We can just create a new slot and just choose original particle settings for it, duplicate it and change the frame start and frame end. So let's set the start to -150 and let's set end to 1. And now in the cache settings we'll bake all dynamics, and now let's select the first one as well and bake all dynamics as well. And now you will see this will be looping nicely because the first one ends right here and we'll get the same behavior. So that's the particle settings and the bubbles. And now we only need to give this some materials and animate the change of color there. So let's press Shift A, we'll add a plane that will serve as a background, and let's just scale it up, and let's look from the camera by pressing 0 on numpad, and we can select the camera, press G then Z and move it up slightly, and then G and Z twice to move it closer. And you can of course change the resolution in the output settings to something like this. Let's bring it even closer. And now I'll press Ctrl B and limit the render preview only for a camera bounce. And in the render settings, I'll switch to cycles, enable GPU and denoising, and I will switch this to optics for NVIDIA card. And for the samples, I will use just 64 for the animation. And now to have some actual light in the scene, let's press Shift A and we'll add an area light, press G then Z, move it up. And let's add some power, something like 500, and let's make this larger. And now let's hold Z and switch to render preview. And you will see the influence of the light right here. So I think it will be safe to move it a little bit back and make it larger, so we have a nice soft light coming from top, and I think something like 250 should be enough for this. And now we'll figure out those materials. So let's select the background and create a new material, and let's make it dark. Now select the shell and we'll create a new material and increase the metallic value, and maybe move this to a warmer tone like this and reduce the roughness. And now for the outer glass, let's create a new material and we'll just increase the transmission to create the glass and reduce the roughness to something like 0.05, something really small. And I will change IOR as well, because now this is acting like a realistic glass, I want this to be more stylized, so let's set something like 1.1, so more of the inside of the battery is visible. And now let's select the fluid, and I will choose the same glass material I've just created and just duplicate it and set its color to something like dark orange or even red. And let's select the bubble right here, and we'll add the same material right there as well. So you should see something like this happening. If this is looking a little bit different, make sure your normals are correct. So let's tab in, select all, and Shift N to recalculate normals. Bubbles should be okay because that's just a UV sphere, and let's make sure this is behaving as well. And for the glass, make sure that this is all the way towards white. You can see how much more translucency you will get when you play with the lightness, even this little right here. So that's about the basic material setup, and now let's animate it. So we have this at frame 5, so let's select the fluid and let's press I over the color right here, and let's move to frame 30, and we'll change this to like a really strong green like this, and let's press I here as well. That will create the keyframe. And now let's move here, press I again, hovering over the color, and let's move here, and we'll actually reuse this. So I can press Ctrl C, hovering over the color here, go to frame 130 and Ctrl V to paste it, and press I to insert single keyframe. So now we have this changing color, but I don't like the midtones right here, so let's move like in between, and let's set our own color tone right here, a little bit like a really strong orange color there. And let's press I to inset, let's press Ctrl C to copy the color, let's go right here in the middle and press Ctrl V and I to insert frame. So now we should have something like this happening. Okay, so basically that's it for the animation. Now it's all about the lighting, and to make this look nice, because you can see this is quite, you know, bland, you will need a lot of lights. Either you can use HDRI to create nice reflections, but you can also just create new area lights like this, and for example set them to disk and just move them around, and you will see these reflections happening right here, and that will really like bring out the quality of the material you created. And you can just move them around like this, and for example to the other side. And to give this like a little bit more brightness in the fluid, we can select the shell, tab into the edit mode, make sure you are in the X-ray view, and select the top face right here, press I to inset like this, and inset once more. And now let's go for edge select by pressing 2 and hold Alt and Shift to select this loop as well, and we'll press Ctrl B to create some supporting loops and reduce with the mouse wheel to only one and create something like this. And now let's go back to the face select by pressing 3 and select this face in the middle, and now let's hit Ctrl and plus on a numpad to expand the selection, create a new material slot and hit assign, and now we can create a new material there and switch principled to emission. And now let's increase to something like 50, so you have a nice light coming from below, and you will see those nice effects. And now we can create a new area light, so let's press Shift A and create a new one. Make sure you are in the 3D cursor pivot point, let's press R then X and rotate 45 degrees to the opposite direction, so press minus and confirm. And now you can press R then Z and rotate it, and we'll create this nice backlight right here. And we can increase the power to something like 150, and now this will really bring out the quality of that fluid. And of course you can modify the color of these lights. And now if we go through the animation, we have something like this happening, and then the discharge, and you can see the nice light coming through the fluid there. So then it's all about setting some, you know, world color, so it has some ambience around here, and maybe duplicating one of the area lights and create really strong one in the back with some color to have something interesting there. And in the render settings you can switch the contrast settings in the color management, something like medium high contrast, and play with the exposure as well. and sometimes it helps to increase the roughness on the background and play with the color there as well. And now to render this out, just go to the output settings, choose your folder right here and switch to FFmpeg, and for the encoding choose MP4 and hit render and render animation. Wait out your frames and you will have your animation ready. So that's it for today's animation tutorial. I really hope you enjoyed this one, and if you did, please leave that like, and if you are new around here, hit that subscribe. Thank you all for watching and have a wonderful day.